House Republicans in that building right there passed a bill to raise the debt ceiling limit, implement spending cuts. It was a victory for House Speaker Kevin McCarthy after days of negotiations. It's called the Limit Save Grow Act, and it only cleared the House chamber 217 to 215 at the beginning of this show just minutes ago. With that, let's start there. Let's bring in our panel. Fox News chief political analyst Britt Hume, Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist, and Trey Gowdy, former congressman from South Carolina. Britt, it was a victory. There's no doubt about it for House Speaker McCarthy. And the question is what happens now? And is the onus on President Biden and the Democrats in the Senate?
Well, remember, the White House has been saying now that the president isn't going to negotiate until there's a bill or the House does what it's going to do. Well, the House has done it. It's passed an increase in the debt limit, which a great many people thought that McCarthy would not be able to pull off. He did. It was close, but he did it. So I think this is a big test for him, and he's passed it. You know, the normal process would be then for the Senate to act and the two to negotiate, but the call on the president to negotiate, I think, will have more weight now that the House has acted.
Leslie, you buy that? I mean, we heard from Senator Van Hollen in something that was not common ground earlier in the show, kind of poo-pooing this bill, but obviously they have to deal with it now. It's in their court.
Yeah, although the speaker certainly has a win with this, he blinked. And the problem is, as you know, when you have one congressperson saying, hey, I want tax breaks for the biofuels like ethanol, and then you have other Republicans say, take it out, and then they take it out. Well, you gain some, you lose some. They flipped Nancy Mace. They didn't get the 218, but like I said, it was a win. I would agree with Britt that the White House and the president did say that, and they need to follow through. But I also look at the numbers, and in the Senate, it's dead on arrival with the Democratic-led Senate.
Yeah, Trey, what do you think? I mean, first of all, it is tough to pass anything with that majority and that, you know, trying to herd the cats in the House under Speaker McCarthy.
Yeah, congratulations to Kevin. He kept all the frogs in the wheelbarrow. But 78 times we have raised the debt ceiling in this country. And quite candidly, you're not going to do anything about the debt and the deficit unless you address the one thing nobody wants to address, which is entitlement. So, yeah, they're going to raise the debt ceiling. There won't be a shutdown. They're going to get something modest. They'll have to do it with bipartisan votes because some Republicans are going to say it's not good enough. But the reality is we'll be right back here in a year and a half or 2 years raising the debt ceiling for the 79th time until we deal with entitlements.
All right, let's turn to our new Fox polls. First of all, the favorable, unfavorable for some of the big figures, obviously. President Biden, 44-56, underwater, Britt. Let me go to the other poll first. The opinion of favorables, there you go, 44-56. The former president, 43-56. Vice President Pence, 39-55. Governor DeSantis, 41-55. Now, the presidential nominee preference. This was interesting. You have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. up to 19%, Britt. Obviously, President Biden at 62% there. And then finally, the Republican presidential nominee preference, a huge lead for the former president over not yet in the race, Florida Governor DeSantis. Your thoughts on some of these poll numbers?
I think that young Bob Kennedy number is pretty surprising. I would have thought he'd be in the single digits. He's almost the definition of a fringe candidate, despite his family's famous name. You know, the guy has significant difficulty speaking, not his fault, obviously, but and he's been stuck on the anti-vax crusade for a long time, and it looks like a fringe candidate. And yet here he is. It shows that there is deep dissatisfaction in the Democratic Party with President Biden.
Yeah, Leslie, the New York Times writes, Biden's 2024 campaign begins. You might miss it at first. Again, this is the New York Times. Mr. Biden has no immediate plans to barnstorm key battlegrounds. Decorative bunting is nowhere to be found. Large rallies will come later. Instead, Mr. Biden's next steps look much like his recent ones, leveraging the White House to burnish his record with ribbon cuttings, willing to cede the stage to a Republican presidential primary that's already descending into a dogfight. Is that what we're going to see, do you think? Is more the same? Maybe what we saw in 2020?
I wouldn't put it that way, but the president definitely is steadfast on doing what's won for him before and continues to win. Look, when I look at some of those poll numbers, especially women pulling away, this happened before the midterm, and I was really nervous about that. But then when you look at the polling on abortion, on book bans, and some of those other issues that affect women, especially women with school-age children, like myself, you know, you see those numbers come back, and we saw that after the midterm election. So I think there's some legitimacy to that New York Times piece, but I'm not worried about these poll numbers. It's still very, very early, and I've always said I think it is going to be a rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
And Trey, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. I talked about it with Jackie earlier. The New York Post has a big picture of this cheat sheet today for the press conference. You know, you have a list of reporters. A lot of times presidents, you know, go down and they call on the different reporter and the staff gives them the list. But if you look closely, this actually has the question. And it didn't match exactly what she asked, but it was pretty close. That's a little different for us.
Yeah, and yet he is going to be the nominee and will be a very formidable general election opponent. I mean, he promised unity. There is unity. Most Republicans and Democrats don't want him to run again. They think the country's headed in the wrong direction and the car's being driven by the wrong person, and he needs the questions written out for him, and yet he will be a very formidable general election opponent, and Republicans apparently don't care. They're going to continue to nominate someone, and I don't see the states that President Trump's going to win this time around that he didn't win last time.
All right, panel, we'll leave it there. I think we'll be talking about this for a while. Thank you.